Giving you a new pink sheet today. Remember, now that's your third one, goes in the front of your binder and it stays with you all year for extra credit potential. But more importantly, it's there for a reason. Like today, we're going over factoring. Factoring is a really important skill for this class. So you want to have a place that you can go. Like when we do factoring some other time in one of our lessons and you're like, I don't understand how to do this, I'm going to say, let's look at your pink sheet. It's this type or whatever, okay? So that means it's something that's going to carry through the whole year. We might need to access it. So I flag it for you by making it pink and you put it in the front of your binder forever, for the rest of the year. Don't forget the purple sheet for your syllabus. Keep bringing those in, ripping them off, leaving them on your desk. I'll grab them when I come and help. Today and tomorrow, we're going to review factoring. Friday is your first quiz on factoring. Monday is when we start the actual pre-calc curriculum. Monday is the day I give you your big old packet. Monday is the day you want to have your 3-ring binder, so you can put that packet in there. Tuesday is the day we go to the Media Center for laptop checkout or getting a laptop. And if you want to get a calculator, hopefully someday soon I will have that form for you. I have not been given it yet, so I've not sent it to you in Canvas. So if you've been looking for it, you haven't missed it. I just don't have it yet. But I will, as soon as they give it to me, send it to you, okay? Anybody have any questions for me before we start? Okay, so like I told you guys yesterday, factoring is the only skill that I actually taking 3 days of class time to review it because it's that important. Some of you are really good at factoring already, okay? Some of you have never been strong factorers. Wherever you fall, hopefully these couple days help you because you really have to know how to do it. So for those of you that are already experts or really good at it, you might be a little bored, especially with the first 3 of 4 examples I'm going to do with you. And please don't think I'm teaching down to you, talking down to you. I'm going to review this factoring pretty quickly, but I'm going to give lots of details. Let me mute this. This is driving me crazy. I'm going to give a lot of information as if you don't really know it, okay? So some of you might be a little bored with it. Bear with me, all right? Yes, this is an AP math class. We won't be doing factoring kind of lessons all year, but we have to know how to do it, okay? So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to do 4 examples, like I said, and you can write them on the front of this, on the back of it. If you want to do it on another sheet of paper, whatever makes you happy is fine. I would recommend maybe writing on the pink sheet. That way, when it comes time to review, like you're like, oh, I forgot how to factor that. You just go to your pink sheet and you find the type that, an example of the type that you're looking at or whatever. But whatever makes you happy, you can do that, okay? And the 4 examples I'm going to do are going to come right off the homework, okay? So what I'm going to be giving you to do is this worksheet. It's got 20 problems on it, but it's a 2-day assignment, okay? And I'm going to do 4 of them right from the worksheet right now. So you won't have to do them again, all right? And I'll remind you of that later. So I'm going to do 1, 5, 13, and 17. You'll see me do those right here, and then I'll remind you when I give you the worksheet. Go ahead and cross those off because we already did them, okay? Instead of doing new. In case they knew. I'm sorry. See, and I would appreciate, and I know I'm not getting on you, if you don't have your laptops open while I'm doing examples. I had some people last year, it turned out they were watching movies and stuff. They're like, I don't have my phone. I'm like, yeah, but you're watching YouTube videos while I'm teaching. So I'm not saying you were. Please, no. I'm not saying that, but I just want to say it. Okay, so here's the thing. In factoring, okay, this first, number 1, is something we all forget, including me. Sometimes I'm like, I didn't even look for a GCF. But no matter what type you have, which is coming up here in a minute, you always have to do that as your first step. The problem is you'll do 10 problems and 9 of them don't have a GCF and 1 does. So you kind of get lazy. We get lazy, like not checking for it. So I really want to emphasize how important that is. It is always the first step is to see if there's a GCF. Sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't. Then we go on to seeing what type we have. I wrote myself a note. Like, I'm always trying to better myself as a teacher. As I teach a lesson, I'm like, that took too long, or we don't need this example. Especially after I saw the AP exam, I'm teaching to a test. Let's face it. I'm teaching you guys how to do best on that test. In the meantime, we are getting ready for calculus if you choose, but that's what I'm doing. So when I saw the test, I was like, oh, I didn't go over that well enough, or oh, I didn't need to emphasize that skill at all. It wasn't tested. One thing I wrote throughout the year and after I saw the test, and I was a grader for the test, is I didn't do enough of the type that you have a GCF. So I made sure I'm going to really emphasize you guys having problems that have a GCF. So that's where we are. So I'm going to start with number 1 from the worksheet. I have to write with lines because I'm too messy. So that's why I'm on this paper. You decide where you're going to write it. Whatever makes you happy, okay? All right, the first step is GCF. G means greatest common factor, GCF. Greatest means the biggest number. A lot of times numbers like 30 and 24 have multiple factors in common. We don't want the smallest one. Like they both have a 2 in common. They both have a 3 in common. They have a bigger number, yes, which is a 6. 6, yes. All right, so I'm going to start with the 6. 6 is one of my factors in my GCF, but also they have variables in common. Sometimes it's just a number, sometimes it's just a letter, and sometimes it's both, okay? So just expect the unexpected. So 6 goes into both of those, and then we want to pick the number of exponents that they have in common, okay? So we can't go higher than the smallest number, because if we said, oh, x to the 7th is the GCF, part of the GCF, it's not, because he doesn't have 7. It has to be what they have in common. So it's really the smaller number of exponents. And you don't have to show this work, but if it helps you, especially if you're not great at factoring or you just like to be very thorough, what you're actually doing is dividing both terms by that GCF, okay? And whatever you get goes in the parentheses. So 30 divided by 6 is 5. And we subtract our exponents, okay? 4 minus 4 is 0, so the x to the 4th just cancel. So that's it. If we did it right, and we did, if I distribute this, I should get that first term. And I do. Okay? 24 divided by 6 is positive 4. And subtracting my exponents gives me x to the 3rd. If we did it right, and we did, when I do the distributive of 6x to the 4th times 4x to the 3rd, I should get this, and I do. And if you notice, there's a plus sign in between these two terms, and back to my notes, when there's a plus sign with 2 terms, we're done. There's nothing else we can do here. That is our final answer. And by the way, let's talk about the word terms. This original problem, number 1 that I wrote in purple, has 2 terms, okay? Terms are separated by pluses and minuses. So 30x to the 4th is 1 term. 24x to the 7th is 1 term for a total of 2 terms, okay? And that's it for that one. Question on that? Anybody? All right, I'm skipping around. We're going to do number 17 next. GCF, always look for it first. All factors have a GCF of 1, a common factor of 1. 1 we don't care about, okay? 1, if I factor out a 1 out of both of those, it's not going to make a difference in the final answer. So we would say, okay, there is no step 1 here. There's no GCF to factor out. So looking at your sheet, this is 2 terms, 1, 2, and it has a minus in between, okay? We are going to expand that into these 2 factors. Notice it's 2 parentheses. 1 has a plus, 1 has a minus. And then there's an A in the front and a B in the back. Let's talk about that. So I recognize this. No GCF, difference of 2 squares is what this is called. These 2 numbers, 16 and 1, are perfect squares. Remember what perfect squares are? Like 1 times 1, 2 times 2, 3 times 3, and so on. Okay, so 1, 4, 9, 16, 25, 36, 49, and so on. So let's just follow the model on that sheet. We're going to have 2 parentheses. 1 is going to be a plus, 1 is going to be a minus. It does not matter which one you put first, okay? You can put the plus first or the minus first, does not matter. And then what's going to go in the front of each set of parentheses is going to be identical, and what goes in the back of each set of parentheses is identical. And that number is the square root of each of these. So if I do the square root of 16, we get 4. Remember, we learned how to do that on the calculators yesterday. Square root of 16 is 4, and anytime you have a variable, it's going to be an even number. It has to be. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, you just split it. So if I split x squared, that would be x. So 4x, 4x, identical twins. And if I multiply those two together, I should get that, and I do. 4x times 4x is 16x squared. Square root of 1, you can do the square root of 1. It's 1. 1 times negative 1 is negative 1. That's it. These are very common. These are the second most common type of factoring we see, and we like them. They're easy. They're quick. There's no work to show. It's just knowing what to do. Okay? Question on that one? Yeah. Yes. You want to move up to like seat 4? Yeah. Okay. That's no problem. You were 8 right now. Okay, I'm going to change it. Just change your phone tomorrow. It's fine. Did you put your phone over there? In number 8? Oh, okay. So you've noticed that those are seat numbers. So in the future, that way we can keep track. Okay. Let's go on to, okay, so we are done with 2 terms. You guys we teach these 2 types in Algebra 2. They're called sum or difference of 2 cubes. You might remember SOAP problem, same, opposite, always, plus. If you had me or Miss Shackton, that's how we taught it. We don't have them in this course. They don't come up on the test, so it's one of those skills I'm going to push to the side, okay? Now let's go on to the types that have 3 terms. Next example I'm going to do is number 5 from your worksheet. So remember, you'll be able to cross these off the worksheet once you get it. Okay, so first thing is a GCF. These 3 terms do not have anything in common, okay? So looking at my little factoring cheat sheet thingy here, we have 3 terms. There's 2 different types, okay? The difference in how you recognize which type we have is what is going on in front of our squared variable. So in front of n squared, what number is in front of n squared right now? 1, not 0, right? It's a 1. We just don't write it. If you write it, it's not wrong. You'll never see it written there. But if you don't see a number in front of a letter, it's a 1, okay? So that means it's the first type. The last example we will do is the hardest type, and that's when the a value that's in front of the x squared is something other than a 1. Technically, there is an a value here. It's 1, okay? So if you look, we have an a value of 1. B is the number in front of the n to the first. That's negative 13, and c is 30. So we have 1, negative 13, and 30, basically. We get really happy when we see this type. And this type, when I say that, means when there's a 1 here. It makes our life much easier. We get very happy when we get this type, okay? Now, the way I teach it and the way Miss Shackton teaches it is the same. So if you've had us, you will recognize this chart method that I'm going to do, and then grouping when we get to the next problem. If you had a different teacher that used a different method and you like it and it works for you, by all means keep doing it, okay? Every algebra teacher has a different way of factoring. None of them are wrong necessarily that I can think of, but if you struggle with this or you don't remember the method your teacher used to use, just use mine, okay? But anyway, so this is what we do. I call it a chart. Kind of make something that looks like a T-chart. And what numbers are going to go here are very specific. So let me set it up. I'm going to put something here and something here, the 2 numbers here. And so let me put the numbers here, then I'll explain what they are. So where I got the 30 is the A times the C. Remember, A was 1, C was 30, so 1 times 30 is 30. And then negative 13 is our B value. Remember, B value is that middle number in front of the end of the first. So what I'm looking for is the 2 numbers that multiply to get positive 30, multiply to get 30, and adds to get negative 13. There's only one set of numbers. I can't find my own, and Evan finds one, and we both work. It's not possible. Everyone would have, there's only one set of unique numbers that will work for here and here. No tricking, okay? So this is what I call your workspace. You can show this work. You can do it in your head, okay? So on a problem like this, I wouldn't need to see any work. Some of you can do this in your head. That's great. But what you're doing is this. You're thinking in your head or writing it out, your choice, what numbers multiply to get 30? So I wouldn't necessarily write all of these for me personally. Maybe you need to, but I'm scanning these numbers in my brain. Like I'm going through all the numbers I can think of that multiply to get 30. Okay? Do you have to write all of those? No, you don't. Okay? I'm just kind of doing out loud what my brain is doing. So I go through these. I know 1 and 30, there's no way to make a 13 out of that. 5 and 6, that's 11 or 1 if I subtract. It's not going to be that. 3 and 10 is looking good, but look, 2 and 15. If I subtract these, I can make a 13. So this is not the answer. So if you don't want to mess up your nice little T-chart here, I'm just going to show you. But this is your workspace. It's okay to make mistakes. Maybe I'm like, oh, I want to do 2 plus 15. And if I make the 15 negative, that gives me negative 13, right? But you have to make sure that also works over here. So if I made the 15 negative here, I would have to make the 15 negative here. If I do that, do I get a positive 30? No. So that can't be my numbers. And it's okay to write and cross out, and some of you need to see it versus doing it in your head. Whatever. This is your workspace. That's all you, whatever you want to do with it. But let's try the 3 and the 10. Well, 3 plus 10 is 13. How do I make it a negative 13? Both negative, that's right. Both of them negative. Okay. Negative 3 plus negative 10 is negative 13. Don't forget, you have to make sure it works on this side as well. And it does. A negative times a negative is positive. Okay? We just found our two numbers. The reason this problem makes us happy is because when there's a 1, once we find our two numbers, we're ready to write our final answer. Okay? Our final answer, split that n squared into 2. If it was an x squared, we put an x and an x. A t squared, we put a t and a t. And then we bring these two numbers over. It doesn't matter what order. Okay? So you can put the negative 3 first or the negative 10. It does not matter. Okay? And that is your final answer. Okay? Yes, and I'm going to do that next. Yep. And that method, so Zach is kind of thinking ahead of like with the grouping method, which I'm going to show you. And I think some teachers teach this type using that method in the beginning, and then they're like, oh, guess what? You didn't have to do that. But on these problems, when there's a 1 in front, you don't have to go any further. Once you have your numbers, you are good. But let's do our final problem, which is number 13, where that is going to happen. Okay, so if you've been kind of snoozing on me because you're like, this is so easy, I did this in 6th grade, this is the hardest one. This has got every potential issue you could have in all-in-one problem, okay? So I'm going to go a little bit slower, make sure you understand it. Please stop me if I'm not clear, you have a question, but just stay with me, okay? So remember the first step is to find the GCF. These are not numbers that I'm 6 I'm familiar with. I'm pretty familiar with 75. I can come up with stuff in my head, but 216 is a big, huge number. I am an expert factorer, okay? I'm going to give myself that compliment. Probably hope that I'm an expert factorer if I'm the one teaching you, but I'm really good at factoring, but I still would have to pick up my calculator to figure out what needs to be done here. I can't do every single thing in my head. I find like some students are like, I don't need a calculator, I can do it. It's okay. Calculators are a tool. They help us. We want to use them when it's appropriate. And it's appropriate because when I look at this and I say, oh, this is a chart problem, right? There's 1, 2, 3 terms. Let me make my t-chart. I'm going to multiply A times C and B. If I do that, the number I'm going to have right here is 216 times 6. If you're having to find two factors that multiply to get a number this big, there's something wrong. That should be a sign that you forgot to do the first step. I'm not here to give you busy work where you have to find numbers that multiply to get that and add to get negative 75. That would be ridiculous. It would take all period. It would take me all period probably. Okay? So remember your first step is to see, is there a GCF? So there is on this one. What is it? I don't know. The trick is, I do know. But The trick is to start with the smallest number, because you can't go bigger than 6, right? Any number that's bigger than 6 is not going to go into 6, and it has to be able to go into all of these numbers. So I always start with that first number. Does 6 go into 6? Of course it does. Does 6 go into 75? Not even. So when you get a decimal, you're like, okay, moving on. 5 doesn't go into 6, 4 doesn't go into 6, let's try 3. So I know 3 goes into 6 2 times. Does 3 go into 75? Yes. Does 3 go into 216? Whoops. 216 divided by 3. Yes, because there's no decimal, I found my number. Notice I counted down. I didn't start with 2 because I want the biggest number. I started with 6 and went down from there. Okay, so I know that they have a 3 in common, right? Do they have a variable in common? No. These two do, but they would all have to have an n to pull in. Right? So I'm going to divide each of these by 3. You don't have to show this little division step at all. And when I divide, I would get 2n squared. And guys, that's one of the things that's great about these calculators. You already did the work. It's right there. 75 divided by 3 is 25. And 216 divided by 3 is 72. Okay? So you are feeling victorious at this point. I figured it out. I found that number. I got out the GCF. Let's go on to the next problem. Here's the problem. Sometimes after you factor out a GCF, you're done, like number 1. Sometimes when you factor out a GCF, you're not done. What you should always do is look at what you have. This is a quadratic trinomial. This is this type right here, 3 terms, and it does have an a value that's not a 1. It's a 2. So I know this one's going to be one of the harder ones. Don't mean to be negative, but I'm just trying to make a point, okay? Now, the 3 is really important. The 3 is part of my answer, but I'm going to ignore the 3 for a little bit and deal with what's in the parentheses. So don't forget about the 3, but he's not part of any of our work anymore. We're done with it. We're just going to carry it down into the answer when we are done. So let's make our little T-chart. So I'm doing A times C and B. So 72 times 2 is 144. And my B value is negative 25. Remember, if there's a sign in front of a number, it always travels with that number. So that's a negative 25. Now, 144 is still a big number, but it's not 1,296 or whatever that number was. Okay? So I'm going to pick up my calculator again and try to find numbers that go into 144 that also give me a negative 25. Okay, so every class period I've been asked that question. I know Ms. Shackton had these calculators that you could find you could use the table to find factors. I don't teach that way because here's the thing. In this course, every single test that you take for me and the AP exam, there are 2 parts, calculator and non-calculator. You could end up probably not this level of a problem without a calculator, but certainly this type of problem without a calculator. So I would hate for you guys to rely on it. And so to answer your question, honestly, I don't know I don't teach it that way, so I don't know if that method, if it's able to be done on there. We can explore it later, or you could ask her maybe or something. But I would rather you not rely so much on it because there could come a moment where you have to do an easier one without a calculator, which I think you could have done because you didn't even ask about it. Okay, so anyway. Now I'm going to take 144. You guys noticed when I did the 30, I didn't pick up my calculator. I just kind of went through my brain one time. You could have used your calculator, but on this one, I definitely need my calculator. I don't know all the factors of 144. I'm not going to write them all out. I'm going to use my calculator. So 144 is an even number, so I know it's divisible by 2. Can I make a 25? I don't worry about signs right now. Is there any way to make a 25 out of 2 and 72? Of course not. So I'm just going to keep going. And what's nice about these is, again, the screen. I can kind of see what I've already tried. 144 divided by 3, no. 3 and 48, that doesn't make a 25. Let's try 4. 4 and 36, we're getting closer, but that's still not going to make a 25. Let's try, what else? 6. 6 and 24, we're getting really close. That doesn't work. There we go. And this can be the most frustrating part of these problems, right there, okay? You saw me try whatever 5, 6 numbers till I found it. It might take you longer. That's the bad part of these problems. But really, once we have that, the rest should be not too bad. So 9 and 16 are my numbers, right? So I'm going to write them down. 9 times 16, 9 plus 16. Okay? Now, 9 times 16 is 144. That works. But 9 plus 16 is not negative 25. What would I have to do to the 9 and the 16 to make a negative 25? Both negative. Make sure it works over here. It has to work in both columns. Negative 9 plus negative 16, good, is negative 25. Negative 9 times negative 16, yep, that's also positive 144. So both numbers are negative. Now, on the last problem that we did, once we had our two numbers, remember, we just got to write our answer. We don't get to do that when there's something other than a 1 there, like a 2. This is where we're going to, this is where the problem really changes from that problem. What we're going to do is bring down the outside two terms. Do I need to see the arrows? No, you don't have to. Notice the plus sign traveled with the 72. So we brought down the outside two terms and we're splitting the middle. We are splitting the middle into two terms. These two. These two numbers are going to come over here. But they're going to need an N on them. The order, and I'll explain why. But the order that you put these in doesn't matter. You can put the 9 first or the 16 first. It does not matter. You decide. Okay? So, but you do need to remember to put a variable on both of them. Since this problem has N's in it, we put an N in it. Okay? And the whole point is it should make sense to you. We just split this middle term into two. It should equal what's above it. And then if you leave the N's off, it's not going to equal 25N. Okay? So you have to put N's on it. Now, everyone listen. Right now, this problem went from a trinomial, 3, to a polynomial with 4 terms. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 terms here. Look, look, look. The very last example on this page, the last one, has 4 terms. I didn't put any of these on the worksheet. 4 terms is like, just like this, where I just start. Here's a problem for you. Go ahead and factor it. If you have 4 terms, you're going to use the grouping method that I'm going to do exactly right here. So tomorrow I'll make one up and do in class so you're ready for it on the quiz. But this is what you would do given 4 terms. You would group parentheses around the front 2 terms, parentheses around the back 2 terms. Grouping 2 and 2. And what we're going to do is factor out the GCF. So what we learned way back on number 1 is exactly what we're going to be doing here. We also did it as the first step here. And we're just going to do it in 2 separate little problems. So the GCF of these 2. So do 2 and 9 have a factor in common other than 1? No. But they do have an N in common. So I'm dividing each of these by N. That's 2N. Minus 9. Remember, you can check this real quick. Do the distributive property. Do I get this and this? Yes, I do. Now, when I look over here, I've got a 16 and a 72. First thing I notice is that our first term, the first term in this set of parentheses is negative. What that means is anytime this is negative, I factor out a negative. 100% of the time. If the first term in your parentheses ever in your whole life is negative, what comes out is a negative. Okay? Always. Now, I'm looking at 16 and 72, and I can pick up my calculator and start figuring out what their common factor is, but there's a hint here. Every time you do these problems, there's going to be a GCF here and then something in parentheses. The something in parentheses is going to be the identical twin to this. If we did it right, 100% of the time, these two should be the same. So that's kind of a hint. If I know this should be a 2n, that helps me see that this should be negative 8. Because negative 8 times 2n is negative 16n. Keep going. Negative 8 times negative 9 is positive 72. Always and forever, these two should be identical twins every time we do it. If they're not, there's a mistake. Now we're ready to write our final answer. So, 2 sets of parentheses. The identical twins, 2n minus 9, goes in either one. Doesn't matter. So 2n minus 9 can go in either set of parentheses. You choose. The other set of parentheses are your GCFs, the n minus 8. N minus 8. One last thing we don't want to forget. The what? The 3. Remember that 3 we took out 5 hours ago? Goes in our final answer as well. That's an annoying problem, right? That's annoying. There's so many steps. There's so many places you have to worry about signs and orders and parentheses and blah, blah, blah. But they exist, so we have to deal with them, okay? These are the hardest ones, but they do come up, so we do have to know how to do them. Okay? So practicing. Please, please, please don't blow off factoring. We have a first quiz on Friday. You want to start off strong, getting a good score on it. I'm going to pass out the worksheet right now. Then I'll put the key up for you. I do have a key. I always put my keys on Canvas as well, so my planning period is next period, so I'll be putting the key up. But you do not need to work on this for homework. The worksheet I'm about to give you, we did 4 of them already, so you're going to cross them out, and we are going to work on this same worksheet tomorrow, okay? So, cross these, and you don't turn anything. Yeah, I'll do that. All right. All right, guys, cross out 1, 5, 13, and 17 that we just did. You don't need to do them again unless you want to. Where's my key? The order of the parentheses does not matter. What?
Can I do like, that isn't the other problem. Can I do the rest of it?
Yeah. You guys write on my worksheet, write on your own paper, whatever makes you happy, you do. Okay? I don't care about that. Okay. Evan, it's like a deja vu. Dylan asking you for paper every single day last year.
It won't stop. I have 0 classes. I'm so sad. I had like 3 classes.
Oh, it's reinforced? Oh. You better start charging.
No, Rodriguez.
Passes that clipboard with the pass tape to it. Oh, great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Homework support, but usually we get everything done in class. But if there's a day that you want, let me back up. They're going to start doing all tutoring in the media center starting on every Wednesday, and then they're going to add a second day if they feel like kids want it after school. So, check back with me as we get going, and I promise I will have more information for you.
Okay.
Okay? Yeah, of course. Where's Juan? Juan. He needs to go back.
You're really wrong. What are you talking about? It's because you're going to this stupid negative. It is a negative point. No, but that doesn't define. It doesn't mean it's a factor. Oh, well, that's what I got from saying. I was like, that doesn't make sense. I said that you could only probably. Why would I divide by a negative? It's literally not. Why would I? Because then it's negative 5. First, people have to vote before you get one. Your argument is well, that's harder to like faster.
Just want to check.